Well, tonight, all right, guys, we heard Brett Favre's comments. He ain't budging, right? Willie, the more we hear about this, the more it seems that Rodgers is sort of poised for an exit from Green Bay here. Do you think this can be fixed?
I think if they change the structure, and if we're talking about the personnel changing the structure and giving Aaron Rodgers what he wants and what's important to him, as far as having some insight and some say, and at least just having a conversation about certain decisions that's going to affect him and the team on the offensive side of the football going forward. I don't really think it's about the contract anymore. I think there was a deal that was offered to Aaron, and it wasn't just about that. It was about prior decisions that were made. It was about the structure that's in place where the coaches don't really have any say-so of who's there, who's not there, or who's getting drafted there. And one of the most important players in our league, one of the faces of our league, not having any input after seeing other teams give input and that equity to other players that are signing these contracts. So I think if the structure changes, probably, if a lot of things changes, probably. Is personnel ready to do that? I don't think so, because now they're going to have to change everything for a player versus doing it for the team, which is sending a certain signal. But that signal, who they're changing for, is pretty much a huge part of the success of what happens in Green Bay.
You know, honestly, whatever Green Bay needs to do to make Aaron Rodgers happy, they need to absolutely get that done. He's a once-in-a-lifetime talent. He's a guy that can completely change an organization or a franchise, and he's proven that. And with everything that he's been able to do as a player on the field, you got to keep him happy, man, by all means necessary. If you look at the top half of the draft this year, you have all those teams that didn't have a great season. They were drafting quarterbacks, and they were drafting quarterbacks for a reason, because that position changes your team.
Let's decode a little bit about what everyone else said. I think when Willie was talking about change the structure, I think he was suggesting that maybe the feud is between Aaron Rodgers and Brian Gutekunst.
There you go.
Who's the GM? I'm just reading the tea leaves here. And I think what ultimately was offered was a top deal, but not the deal Aaron was necessarily thinking would give the respect that he wanted to earn. He's the reigning MVP. So it looks as though this will come down to a Gutekunst versus Rodgers situation. And I don't know if I'd want to be on either end of that. And I certainly wouldn't want to be on it.
Yeah, but you know what? And what's really ironic about this whole thing, he's not blaming anybody. He's aiming right at Brian. And he's telling him, this is the way you've chose to handle business and do things. Now, it's been a year. I mean, it's been a couple of years since the Jordan Love incident, okay? So I didn't get a phone call. We didn't have a conversation about that. And I get it. Hey, we're not trying to replace you. We're just bringing a guy in because we know what this team looks like if you're injured, okay? We're not very good. So we've got to protect the future and if you're not out there because of an injury. Simple conversation you can have with a superstar MVP guy on your team. And there's other things that take place. So when you say basically, look, this is the way we've done it. This is how we're going to do it. We've had success, and you're the quarterback. You play quarterback, and we'll handle everything else. That can rub certain guys the wrong way, especially guys who we know are a little sensitive to certain issues and things that we've seen in the past, and especially when other quarterbacks in our league are getting that type of treatment with the organization.
Oh, we're going to go more decoding here. Other quarterbacks, meaning I think Dak Prescott got a pretty big deal, and that might have made it seem a little bit odd for Aaron Rodgers, again, reigning MVP. And the situation here, if I'm Brian Gutekunst, it seems like a lose-lose. Give Aaron what he wants, or you're going to have Jordan Love as your quarterback. This is going to be, probably not the best season if you're a Packers fan, and that happens.
I think the team and Aaron knows what that may look like, so they
know what the flip side of that coin is. Willie, we touched on this too. They're like this right now. Dry eyes across the board. No one is blinking in this staring contest here. If he's traded, Rodgers will be the first player in NFL history to be traded despite winning MVP just the previous season. Crazy. All right, guys, thank you. But you mentioned Dak, didn't you, Cynthia, there? Last week, video surfaced of Dak Prescott doing drills. He said right here on NFL Total Access that he was close to feeling game ready. So coming off an ankle fracture suffered nearly 7 months ago, the Cowboys QB said Tuesday that he could take the field now if need be.
I mean, close. I mean, I can go play in the game right now and in my head be very, very successful. There's no doubt that when I need to be successful, when I need to do the things that it takes to be on the field, I'll do exactly that, and the timing will be right.
Hello there to Mike Garafolo. And Mike G, last week Dak told Willie and I, hey, he's feeling much farther along than he thought he'd be. Now he's saying, I could take the field right now if you needed me to. What are you hearing about his recovery?
Well, I'm hearing the good news, Dak Prescott, is you don't have to rush it. You don't have to be ready now because there's no games. In fact, we don't even know when the games are going to be played until next week, a week from today, right here on NFL Network. Tune in for that. There's your promo right there. But with regard to Dak Prescott and the OTAs and anything that would happen this spring, I would expect he would be on the side for that because, again, there's no reason to rush that. There's no reason to put him out there unnecessarily because you saw how well he played early last year. Do not forget the pace that this guy was on before he got hurt. We're talking about 6,000 yards he would have been flirting with if he had continued at that pace that he was on. Probably wouldn't have continued, but regardless, he was playing well early on in a continued offense with Kellen Moore, but a new head coach in Mike McCarthy. So it's good that he's coming along this quickly. The Cowboys are saying, hey, that's great. That's the confidence that we had in him when we signed him to that contract extension. But should anybody be on the field and the Cowboys be on the field this spring, I would expect that Dak would still take it easy.
Along those same lines, Mike, the league sent clubs a reminder about players working out away from the team facilities. What's this about?
This is about Juwan James, the injury to the Broncos offensive tackle that he suffered in a torn Achilles that should knock him out for most of the season, if not all. And he had $10 million in guaranteed money coming to him this upcoming season until he suffered that injury away from the team facility. Now, Quinnen Williams, the Jets defensive tackle, we reported he broke his foot at the team facility. So that would be considered a football injury. But for Juwan James, it would be considered a non-football injury. Now, teams have known this. There's no need to remind them or anything, but I believe that the league sent this memo out to teams today as a way of reminding the NFLPA, hey, you want your players to work out. That's great, but you want them to work out away from the facility. If they get injured there, any guaranteed money, anything like that, could potentially be out the window because that's considered a non-football injury if you're not at the team's facility. So take that risk upon yourself if you don't want to participate in these options.
Season's 841 career tackles, 3 Pro Bowls, and a Walter Payton Man of the Year award, just to name a few. Today, we got Thomas Davis on special assignment. So let's check out some draft grades presented by Lexus. Had to do a little way back Wednesday for you, Thomas, so you could remember how it felt. Not that you need a reminder, I'm sure.
The good old days.
Yes,
the good old days.
Exactly. Undeniable career success for you, my friend. Now I want to get your draft grades on your former teams. And let's start with the Panthers. What do you think about what they did in the draft this year?
So I give the Carolina Panthers an A in what they were able to do in the draft. You go in and you get a kid that you can plug and play in, J.C. Horn. He's the guy that they absolutely needed to draft. When you look at the receivers that they have to face in their division, you needed a big, strong, physical cornerback that can come in and compete with those guys. And I think that adding J.C. Horn has definitely done that for him. And if you go down a little bit, and if you look at the receiver that they drafted in Terrace Marshall out of LSU, I think he's another kid that adds value. He can stretch the field. He's a guy that I thought personally should have been a first-round pick, but he had some injury things that kind of knocked him down. And their ability to trade back and create more value, I think, definitely made this draft an A for the Panthers.
And Thomas, the Panthers, no question, have locked in on defense, right? Look at what they did in last year's draft. Jeremy Chin over there, they added A.J. Bouye in free agency as well. They're getting it done. Yes. All right, let's talk a little Chargers here. They have drafted solid first-rounders over the last, 4 or 5 seasons. How'd they do this year, though?
Yes, I think they did a great job. I would still give them a B, though. I think they did a great job. When you add a kid like Rashawn Slater in that comes in, he's going to protect your all-world Rookie of the Year quarterback. And then you add Asante Samuel to replace a guy, Asante Samuel Jr., let me correct that, to replace a guy that's been a mainstay for them on defense at cornerback and for so long in Casey Hayward. And you also draft a kid out of Georgia, Trey McKitty, that's going to replace Hunter Henry, another fixture in their offense for so long. I think that they did a great job of replacing some of those guys, but I really wish that they would have done a better job to replace the void that's been left by Melvin Ingram being gone. So I would definitely give them a B.
I think they've done a good job of players, right? Individually, these guys have been great putting up numbers, but it hasn't translated to wins to where they need to be to compete in that division. All right. Lastly, Washington. What'd you think of their draft selection?
So now I was very excited about Washington's draft. I had to give them an A+ because when you look at what they were able to do in the first round alone, I felt like Jamin Davis was a kid that was going to go a lot higher in the draft, but he fell right into Washington's lap at number 19. When you add him into that defensive front that they have with his ability, he's a kid that reminds me a lot of Darius Leonard and what he's able to do with his size and his speed. So adding him in, and then you factor in Dynamic Brown out of UNC. He was a kid that they drafted in the later rounds, but he's a kid that stretches the field, right? He absolutely dominated the NCAA when it comes to deep threat receiving. So I definitely think that he's going to help that team create some other stuff for Terry McLaurin and some of the other guys on that offense. And just adding in the guys that they added this offseason, I think this is going to be a real special defense for sure in Washington.
So last year they had a top 5 defense. Given everything they've added this year too, where would you rank Washington's defense now?
It will surprise me if they're not the number 1 defense in the entire league. Like I said earlier, you factor in having the D-line that they have, and then you add some pieces at linebacker, like drafting a first-round kid in Jamin Davis. They added William Jackson in free agency, and then St. Juice in the draft. So I think that they've done a tremendous job of upgrading some areas that they needed upgrading, and adding William in the secondary is going to help this defensive line, and you just work vice versa. So I feel like they are adding all of the pieces that they needed to completely be the number 1 defense in this league.
Washington defense looking to shut down the NFC East. All right, Thomas, thank you. A reminder for you at home of that top 10 board, how it looked like after that first 10 picks in the 2021 NFL Draft. Of course, Trevor Lawrence, number 1, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Kyle Pitts, Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Penei Sewell, J.C. Horn, and Patrick Surtain II to round it out. Now, those 3 QBs taken in the top 10, they will be on the Move the Sticks podcast with Daniel Jeremiah. Here's a little sneak peek for you.
With the first pick, the Jacksonville Jaguars select Trevor Lawrence.
He's really unbelievable.
The sky's the limit for him.
I think Trevor can be an international superstar.
He can be pure in that pocket.
He's big like Peyton, but just a better athlete.
With the second pick, the New York Jets select Zach Wilson.
He is one of the top athletes I have ever coached.
He's never met a throw he didn't like.
Zach goes for it all.
At any time, he can make that game-breaking play.
Wilson, touchdown!
The Chicago Bears select Justin Fields, quarterback, Ohio State.
The talent level is just off the charts.
Sometimes you think he's supernatural.
He's smart, he's really accurate.
And he's focused and he's determined.
He'll be a wild success in the NFL because of that.
So who's changing the face or the fate of their franchise? Willie and Cynthia, take this one.
Thanks, MJ. So, Cynthia, when we talk about changing face or changing fate, a lot of first-round picks in this draft for the quarterback position. Let's start with Trevor Lawrence, the number 1 overall. Is he changing face or changing fate for the Jacksonville Jaguars?
This one's easy. He's
Absolutely.
changing the fate of the Jacksonville Jaguars. I don't think we have to go too deep into that.
No.
I talked to some of my friends at Ohio State, and they said when facing him, there's just no one like him. And that's the coaching staff. Like, this is Ryan Day, who knows what he's talking about.
Right.
So, this is the type of person you want to say, okay, this is the guy who is big and scary, and he's going to change everything.
And he can do it all, right?
Yeah.
So when you look at the list of quarterbacks that the Jacksonville Jaguars have drafted at number 1, they don't come close in stature, what he can do with his arm, his size, his strength, running the ball, the versatility that he adds at the quarterback position makes it tough, of course, on opposing defenses. Okay, now let's go over to Zach Wilson for the Jets, number 2 pick overall. Face or fate?
Oh, no. I'm going to go with his young face. I'm going to pick his young face on this one. Why? I still don't love what's going on with their O-line. Mekhi Becton, the big ticket we saw, he is hurt. That is scary. It's really hard to learn and adapt to a new situation when you don't have time. Rushing the quarterback is a big deal. Zach Wilson had a lot of time behind that BYU line. I'm going to see how this play action kind of develops because he was really good at it, but time really helps.
You're right, and I agree with you because when you look at so many holes that they need to fill on this team, which they did an amazing job in the draft. They got another tackle / guard, running back, receiver. They did everything that they needed to do to start But when you look at the history of the Jets and the quarterbacks that they've drafted in the first round, the Mark Sanchez, the Sam Darnold, who has just moved to Carolina, and some of the other quarterbacks, it's just too much to overcome right now. So I'm going to say right now he's just the face. All right, next quarterback, Justin Fields. Chicago Bears moved all the way up to get this man because why? Is he special, Cynthia?
Yeah, I'm going with the face. Chicago Bears fans, this is one to get excited about. Right. I know we're going to put up a list of past Chicago quarterbacks. Everyone's put up that list before. But when I look at Justin Fields, I see the opportunity to do multiple things. They haven't been multiple in a while. And that opportunity with Matt Nagy, and they fixed their line a little bit, addressed a lot. They've got a good defense. Maybe there's no Aaron Rodgers. This could be a great situation to learn under because, you know, that division isn't super strong compared to some of the other ones.
And I also have faith that he is a guy that can change the complexion, change the face of this organization. Matt Nagy said this is a generational pick for them. They moved up all those spots because they know he's played not only against the best competition, but he's played at a high level every single time. He's been consistent, and he offers so much to an offense. And again, look at the draft picks that Chicago has made. Nothing adds up. Nothing is really, they don't really have a complete guy ever at that quarterback position like they did Justin.
And sometimes motivation is everything, and I think both the coach and the GM are very motivated to get this one right.
And don't motivate Justin Fields because he failed to some people. So they got that problem on their hands as well, MJ.
Motivation? Justin Fields doesn't need motivation. Look at this, not wasting a second. He posted this on his Instagram. The Check Down reposted it here. Video on IG of him working out and, of course, already rocking that Bears gear. All right, Chicago, we see you. All right, we've got a few more questions about this soap opera in Green Bay.
You know, sort of his place on this team, his status, and again, a lot of people are going to sit here and say that what's wrong? They won 13 games the last 2 years. I mean, what could he be so upset about? The world of sports isn't the same place that it was 10 or 15 years ago. Players are feeling more powerful. And because Aaron Rodgers is so dug in on this, that's one of the reasons why I think we are very much in for the long haul.
Long haul, indeed. Mike Garafolo, Cynthia Freeland back with me now. Now, we've heard a lot of different voices on this situation, except for Aaron Rodgers directly. Differences of opinions across the board. But what do you believe, actually, Mike, to be the root of the drama here?
The drafting of Jordan Love is a huge one, but it's also my understanding Rodgers looking down to Tampa and seeing Tom Brady able to bring free agent after free agent in, including Antonio Brown, whom Bruce Arians said, we're not going to sign. And then all of a sudden they wound up signing him. So Brady's getting his way down there. Meanwhile, Rodgers can't even keep Jake Kumaro on the roster when he was already there. So that's a lot of the frustration that Rodgers has felt like he isn't being heard. And then they're drafting his replacement. That happened last spring. And then last fall, he was telling prospective free agents, I am told via multiple sources, that look, before you make your decision on whether to be back here, I'm not expecting to be back here in 2021. So the point of this is it's not just some decision that Rodgers made on a whim the last couple of weeks or even months. I mean, this goes back to the beginning of last season when he was already letting it be known to those closest to him inside the locker room that he's not happy. And because he's not happy, he doesn't want to be here in 2021 and beyond. So he seems pretty dug in. Let's see where it goes from here, because you're right, MJ. He hasn't said a word. He could end all of this speculation by coming out and saying something, and he's not doing that.
Well, I'm going to look at what we know. He has tons of leverage. Being the MVP, that's huge leverage. It doesn't get better than that. Number two, he has other options. Whether or not we can say for sure exactly what they are, the term sheets are very likely, from what I'm hearing, pretty much all signed, sealed, and delivered. They just need to get Aaron Rodgers traded first. So teams have been making room, figuring out how to get the equity they need to trade potentially with the Packers. So if you look to see between leverage and the opportunity, Aaron Rodgers doesn't need this team anywhere near as much as the team needs Aaron Rodgers. So Brian Gutekunst, unfortunately, doesn't have the leverage here. So he's probably going to have to either figure out how to please Aaron Rodgers or figure out a trade and then deal with all of those repercussions. So to me, with this one, it comes down to the math on one side really favors Aaron Rodgers, and the math on the other side does not favor Brian Gutekunst.
And to Mike G's point, I mean, this goes deep. This has layers to it. He's been packing that suitcase for a little bit now, according to several reports. So see how long it'll take for it to actually come to fruition. All right, thank you both. Hey, Willie and Thomas, I'm going to send it over to you guys for players only and the players' perspective on all this.
Yeah, and Thomas, we've been hearing a lot of other people's opinions, but as players, we've been in multiple locker rooms. So give me your opinion. When you see a superstar on your team get into it with personnel, how does that affect you and other players in the locker room?
You know, I think for us as players, as time has evolved, you know, I think guys have transitioned from looking at it as, okay, he's just being greedy or he's just being this or being that. I think guys are starting to understand. We understand the business side of things. And when you look at this situation that Aaron Rodgers is in right now, we don't fully understand or know what the gripe is about, right? But at the end of the day, we could all assume that it has to do with personnel and him wanting to bring in more receivers to help him and Devontae Adams out. So when you think about that, as a player, you can't be upset. You can't be disappointed because you understand that nobody is going to be more passionate about winning in that locker room than Aaron Rodgers would be at this point in his career.
Right, and when you talk about Aaron Rodgers, you're not just talking about a regular quarterback. He's a Hall of Fame quarterback in our league. And when you have these type of issues, Thomas, go on in the locker room, when I was in New England, we didn't talk outside of the locker room. We tried to keep everything in-house. And when something did leak out, it was addressed immediately. We all got on the same page, and we left it there. And we let the players that were dealing with those issues handle those issues. But when it's your star quarterback, and it affects a lot of different people, you have to understand that Aaron has a point. And I'm saying he has a point because now these teams, even the coaching staffs are assembled based on who the quarterback is. When you bring in these young quarterbacks, you're going to bring in a quarterback that fits him. You're going to bring in a head coach that can fit him and what he likes to do, like Kyler Murray and some of these other quarterbacks that you have. And you have to understand when you're drafting a quarterback, you're drafting a lot of other things that go along with it. So why not have a say? Why not have some type of input? Why not have a conversation when you're coming up with schemes and game plans and you're bringing in players to fit what this player does really well? And when you look across the league, there are young players that are younger than Aaron that have not put in as much work as Aaron that is getting this equity, getting this partnership. And I think Aaron's just taking it personal, as he should.
Yes, like if you look at the Russell Wilson situation that happened in Seattle, I think you know they came to an understanding and agreement, and I feel like Russ has a huge voice, just like Aaron has a voice. But I think what we talked about earlier, one of the most disappointing things in this whole situation is that this information came out from a group chat.
Right.
It came out from something that we as players see as an honor code. Honor code, anything that happens within this meeting, within this text group chat, any of that stays in-house. And whenever something like that comes out, man, you start to look at your teammates different, guys pointing fingers, and that's when you have a rift in your locker room. So that's one of the things that they'll have to address as well.
Yeah, you can't ever break the bro code in the locker room. That's important with players to trust and all the other things that go along with that. Well, there's a lot of things going on with this situation. There's a lot of levels to it. I guess as we go, MJ, we'll find out more and more, and we'll see what happens ultimately.
All right.
Going to be exciting.
I'm MJ Acosta-Ruiz. She is our resident fortune teller, Cynthia Freeland.
Full disclosure, no crystal ball included on this one.
Nah, just a master's degree in predictive analytics. But I promise you, she only uses her powers for good.
Most of the time.
All right. All right, Cynthia. So as we get ready for that schedule release, what are your formulas and algorithms saying about the probabilities here for wins? Let's start with the reigning champs, the Buccaneers. Higher or lower than 11.5 wins?
Did somebody forget there's a 17th game? Because this one seems like the easiest hire that I could possibly imagine. The team got better. The defense got better. Did Tom Brady go somewhere and they didn't tell me? No.
Nope.
What about, did Todd Bowles leave and not be the architect? Oh, okay. We're going to go with more. Over, higher.
So higher. Bottom line, higher. All right. All eyes on Green Bay these days as things stand with Aaron Rodgers under center, though. all things being equal. Higher or lower than 10.5 wins for the Packers?
I'm sorry, Packers fans. I think you should go get this while the getting's good. I think it's going to be lower than that. Why? Well, I don't necessarily think Aaron Rodgers will be there, first of all. And second of all, even if he is there, I think there's some interesting matchups that could mean 10 wins is probably about the ceiling. Oh. And if they had to go with that backup quarterback, okay, on to the next one.
I mean, because they're not already going through enough.
I don't know if we've talked about Aaron Rodgers enough in this.
I don't think so.
I don't know if we've talked about Aaron Rodgers enough in the show.
What about the 49ers? Higher or lower than 10.5 wins in San Francisco?
Higher. Hey. Well, it's because you're wearing red. But
Clearly.
Other than that, one of the reasons is I don't necessarily understand what happened with maybe the Seahawks. I'm not sure who's playing in their situation. And if you look at their matchups, they get a nice, favorable schedule. I like their opportunities to get better at the quarterback position no matter who, because Jimmy Garoppolo is going to come back healthy. Remember, they're not playing a very tough schedule, fourth place. That's going to be helpful for them.
Speaking of the Seahawks, who you just mentioned, what about them? Higher or lower than 9.5 wins for Seattle?
I'm not going to be very popular in Seattle in this one. This has nothing to do with Russell Wilson. I think about 9. I'm not sure what's going on with this team. I do think they'll change their style of offense a bit so that Russell Wilson doesn't get clobbered like you're seeing on your screen right now. But I'm very unclear what goes on with the defense. Plus, Arizona got better. Matthew Stafford's in the division now, and I told you that the Niners are going to do well. So I'm not exactly sure what's going on with the Seahawks. I don't think that many wins.
Not great news for a bunch of people, but a couple teams looking better this season. All right, Cynthia, thanks. Willie and Thomas, they have a little something cooking for us.
Thank you, MJ. Okay, Thomas, are you ready?
Of course I am. For what?
We got a little work to do. We got a little